It's pretty amazing when you think about it. Sometimes the biggest changes to a country's laws don't start in some grand parliament building. They start with one person's fight for justice, a fight against something truly terrible. And today, we're going to talk about a landmark legal moment in India that did exactly that. So that really is the core question for us today. We're going to follow this incredible story of how one woman's awful experience sparked a complete legal revolution, one that totally redefined what safety and dignity mean in workplaces all across India. All right, let's get right into it. To really get a handle on the law here, you've got to understand the human story behind it, the story that basically forced this law to exist. And it all starts with the incredibly brave work of a social worker named Bhanwari Devi. So Bhanwari Devi, she was a grassroots worker out there in her village fighting for social change. And because of that work, she was brutally attacked. She was gang raped. And it was this horrific, unspeakable act that ended up being the catalyst. It just blew the lid off a huge, dangerous gap in the country's laws. Well, the injustice she faced after the assault, within the legal system itself, was just staggering. It pushed women's rights groups to step up and take action. They filed what's called a collective petition, and this fight, it went all the way to the top, to India's Supreme Court, in a case that is now legendary, Vishaka versus the state of Rajasthan. In this case, it exposed a really critical problem, something legal experts call a legal vacuum. Think about it. Back then, in India, there was literally no specific law that defined what sexual harassment at work even was, let alone how to deal with it. This meant victims were just stuck with almost no real way to get justice. Okay, and this is where things get historic. The Supreme Court saw this massive hole in the law and did something absolutely groundbreaking. They basically said, look, the fundamental right to life and liberty, which is guaranteed in our Constitution, has to include the right to be safe where you work. So since Parliament hadn't made a law, the court just stepped in and created one themselves. Incredible, right? So what did the court actually come up with? Well, they laid out these core principles, which we now know as the Vishaka Guidelines. And these guidelines, they became the absolute foundation for what a safe workplace in India should be. These guidelines were built on three honestly revolutionary pillars. First up, they finally gave a clear legal definition for sexual harassment. No more gray areas. Second, and this is the real game changer, they shifted the burden, the responsibility off of the victim and put it squarely on the shoulders of the employer. And third, they made it a rule. Every employer had to provide a safe working environment, period. That one principle completely changed the power dynamic. Suddenly, harassment wasn't just the victim's problem to deal with alone. Nope, it was now the employer's legal duty to step up, prevent it from happening in the first place, and take real action when it did. But wait. The story doesn't stop there. That 1997 ruling from the court, that was really just the beginning. What these guidelines did was set the stage for something much more permanent, a solid legal framework. And get this, for 16 years, these guidelines, which, remember, were created by judges, not politicians, they weren't just suggestions, they were the law. This was the main tool people had to fight workplace sexual harassment all across India. This timeline here really lays out that journey perfectly. You see the court's 1997 guidelines acting like this crucial bridge, right? It filled that legal vacuum for years, until Parliament finally passed a formal law in 2013. And that law, it was built directly on the foundation the court had already laid. I mean, when you look at it side by side like this, the change is just undeniable. We went from a system with no clear laws and zero accountability to a whole new world. A world with clear definitions, where employers were responsible, and where there was a real foundation for people to feel safe and respected at work. And that's really why this is so important. Even today, every single modern protection we have against workplace sexual harassment in India, you can trace it all back to this one court case. A case that started because of one woman's fight for justice. It set up the core ideas that are still protecting people right now. So, the story of the Vishaka Guidelines is, I think, such a powerful reminder that laws aren't just set in stone. They can be changed, they can be pushed to evolve, all because of the courage of one person and the boldness of our institutions. And it kind of makes you think, doesn't it? What are the legal vacuums of our time, and who's going to be brave enough to step in and fill them?